All right. Hello. I am
Hey,
with DaveSuperPowers, as you may know him. How's
how's it
it going,
going?
Dave?
Great.
the unless you are in his classes, the faceless voice of God in the MBTI YouTube community, as I would say. He spits that wisdom on YouTube from time to time, you may know. So I have some questions, but really, I'm really excited. Thank you, Dave, for agreeing to do this video.
Yeah, of course.
Um, I really am excited to get to know who you are as a person, as well as just the objective personality type stuff.
Oh, well, sure. Before we get started, let's tell everybody how we met, because you and I
Yes,
are friends, kind of
yes,
as much in real life while still being
yes,
on the internet as possible.
yes,
We have been friends for a couple of years now.
yes. I think it was because a couple years ago, I made a video with my friend Crystal,
Uh-huh.
and I can link it below. And it is about we were noticing IPs, IJs, EJs, and EPs and the differences we saw. I believe you commented on that one, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I reached out to you. I found your videos, and you were graduating college at the time, and
Yes.
I started leaving comments on your videos, and I
Yes.
reached out to you, and then we ended up talking and became friends ever since.
Yes.
So
Yes.
yeah.
So, I really appreciated that. And actually, I was just talking to someone the other day. I don't know if you, okay, so for those who might not know who you are, would you consider yourself an INTJ for all intents and purposes?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. His system's a little more complicated than that.
There's more
But
moving parts than just 16, but 16 expanded. So yeah, in that neighborhood, yeah.
well, yeah, I was talking to an INTJ the other day that was talking about, and it actually reminded me of you. They were talking about how for they immediately when they see a person, I want to know if you relate to this, but when they immediately see a person, they can sort of see what they're all about, what their strengths are, and what their weaknesses are. And they were saying that they're a really good judge of character because they can tell if someone is putting a lot of effort into their weakness, and it makes them respect them
Yeah.
quickly. And that was really interesting to me because I feel like it takes me a minute to, I mean, I'd like to say I'm a good judge of character, but to be honest, I give everyone the benefit of the doubt for a really
Mhm.
long time. And the way he was describing that process, it actually reminded me of you and made me think, reminded me of how I value you, of how I feel like you really notice those sorts of things. And Dave has been someone where over the past couple of years, we've talked on the phone a few times, has made me really feel good about the strides I've made on my own,
Yeah.
like TI. And I really appreciate that because I feel like you actually see, and I don't know if that's connected to NI and TE or FI. I feel like you see the effort that people put towards self-growth in a completely different way from how I do. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of it has been getting older. Like, so kind
Yeah.
of, I'm almost 41 now. So like seeing
Mm-hmm.
the cycle a few times, I have enough SE on it. And just being on the internet for a long time now, you just see a lot of people come and go. So yeah, I do pick up on the patterns of like, okay,
Yeah.
here's somebody with a lot of energy, a lot of fire, a lot of passion, a lot of interest. They're taking hits in dealing with negativity, pushing forward, building positivity. And like those people just start to stand out over time. And
Yeah.
so it's encouraging to see other people out there in the fight. And then like also too, like part of getting older, I think a lot like
Mm-hmm.
it gets a little bit easier to let go of differences. When you're young, you're arguing with everybody. And then as
Yeah.
you get older, you realize, I have more in common with these people or with other people than I realize. And you start to look for the positive. So
Yeah. And I think for me, I know I've told you about this. I find it funny. I've kept track of all of the types that people have typed in my comment section over
mhm.
the few years. And I've been called almost everything at this point.
Yeah.
And I find it funny how the more I intentionally work on my weaknesses, the more people will accuse me of being like I don't know, ESFP, someone even said
Yeah.
ESTJ. That's the thing I'm the most proud of, that
Yeah.
like, I don't know, that person was probably like pretty stupid, but just the fact that somebody out there thought I was an ESTJ for 1 second makes me
Right. Right.
like,
I know. I take it as a compliment when people type me ESTP. I'm like, wow, thanks. I'm trying to. I'm glad I've fooled somebody.
yeah. And did you happen to see that I made a response video to your video on
I did. Yeah, I did
Yeah.
actually see that. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, because I thought it was interesting too about how there were a couple people being like, how is that even TI? You're talking about your feelings.
Right.
And I didn't really know how to explain, because no matter how I explain, you're going to see my FE out there. And I
Yeah.
feel like those sort of things confuse people when they're
Yeah.
typing right off the bat, is that I'm using NF language to try my best to explain this sort of TI underlying system that I feel.
Right.
So how do you not get confused by those things, or how
Yeah.
do you conceptualize of those things?
Right. Yeah. What we do over here with our kind of new system we've been working on for a few years now with the objective personality, really what we're doing, it's just we've systematized guesswork and statistics. That's it. So it's really not that fancy at all. Like, all we're doing is when we're typing other people, we're doing what everyone else is doing, and that is analyzing somebody the best we can with the information from that person we have at that time, and with the definitions and terms that we have at that time, and just trying to make our best guess of, I don't know, I think they're an INFP based upon this, this, and this. Because you can look at what somebody's doing, just like you're mentioning, and interpret it so many different ways. And then all we're doing is I'm writing down, okay, I think this person is an INFP. And then I'm leveraging the statistics with my partner, Shannon, to see if she's also independently getting that same type from that observation. So if we've typed 10 people and we've got 9 out of 10, we've typed them as, the same types. We got, both got INFP, et cetera. Then we're like, okay, the statistics are suggesting that there's some type of objectivity here.
Yeah.
What's interesting though, is that I cannot prove any one particular type at all ever, because it could just be a coincidence that me and Shannon both typed you as an ENFJ and you've typed yourself as an ENFJ. Maybe that's a coincidence. What the hell would I know? Now I could appeal the statistics and say it's very interesting that you act and look like many other people that we have logged of your same or similar type, that we went through this checklist. It wasn't just out of 16 types, it was out of 512. So we can expand the statistics to make it more and more interesting. But still, at the end of the day, it's just a statistics game, So it's that kind of model that we're trying to get really good at. It just takes a lot of time and effort, and we got to build up our data sets and practice and stuff. And then from that, we're planning to then take that kind of up the scientific ladder to not say we can prove anyone's type. We're saying, hey, look, Myers-Briggs has always got its ass kicked for not even being able to have the statistic game where when they would have different people type somebody, they would only get a percentage of like 60% consistency or whatever. And so we want to roll in with 90% or higher numbers, and then use that to kind of leverage a higher conversation scientifically,
Yes.
So yeah, but at the end of the day, I'm just guessing too. That's it.
Yes. And I really like the humility that you have with that. And something that my TI believes is that I think TE is super humble, at least from my perspective. As a TI inferior, I've noticed that where, okay, for me, I feel like Crystal and I do something similar to you and Shannon. We just don't have a system at all.
Totally. And that's all we were. We noticed that's why, like, when we see all of these personality people in the community, people that are doing other businesses or websites or blogs or whatever, like that's who we are. That's who we started. Just a few people kind of messing around like we see so many other people doing. And we just got aggressive on the scientific thing, but it's really the same thing. So when we see you and Crystal plus so many other people out there, that gives us a lot of encouragement of like, yes, more of that. That's what Myers and Briggs literally were, just a mom and daughter playing around with this stuff,
Yeah. So I find it interesting where if I was to test Crystal and I, whether or not we agree of certain types, I'm sure there would be something statistically significant because we almost always agree. But something that I always wonder is how much do we influence each other? Even if I know that you and okay, actually, before I get into this,
Yeah.
do you want to just tell me briefly? I know you just talked about it, but the SE of what is objective personality? Tell me briefly what it is. Who are you? What it is?
Yeah. Pretty much, it's me and Shannon. She's my girlfriend someday to be wife, right?
Ooh.
Yeah. Relationships. And so we have been working together for like 7 years now. She was with me all the way back in the original, I call them DaveSuperPowers days, 2010, 11, when I was just putting up YouTube videos on Myers-Briggs. And we were just using them for kind of marketing and sales and stuff like that, as well as self-growth and all that kind of stuff. And then from there, that kind of hit a collision course with like science, like the Vox videos before the Vox video came out of like really looking at Myers-Briggs and all that. We had already kind of started to see that kind of writing on the wall. And so we took some time to see if this really could be objectively tracked. And so we had found by using this kind of, we call it experiment or however you want to set it up, where you have the two people typing people independently and then seeing if they get the same type. We just got really good at that and then building that study up, meaning when we would type people that they were the same, we would take the people that we had typed and we would archive them in their Google Docs. So everyone that we had typed in ENFJ would go in the ENFJ doc, et cetera, right? And then from there, it's like, okay, now that we can objectively track something, now it's building that up over time to kind of leverage it up to the scientific realm. And from there, the bottom line is we want to get these Carl Jung functions and patterns in a way to where they can be sensorily tracked and objectively tracked, so they can be leveraged by larger parts of the community of the world. Because self-help groups at whole, schools, governments, businesses, good guys, bad guys, millions and millions of people can use such a tool when it can be packaged in the sensory, when it can be qualified and measured and all that. And that's why this amazing personality stuff that we all enjoy in our little subculture, it stays forever in this culture. Mm-hmm. So that's our goal, is to get it kind of objectively tracked, scientifically tracked, so we can get outside to the mainstream. Long term, this is like a lifelong goal, so we're in no hurry. So,
and that is a good point. Something that reminded me is that I've been in this community for 7 years, and I have seen the cycles of people go through. And for those of you who are new, you might not know, but if you have been around for a while, you'll start to see the same questions pop up over and over again. And there are some of us that have been in the community for a while that become frustrated by that then maybe they leave. And there isn't a really and I think that your desire to make this into something that can be used later on, I really admire that, because that's not really something that I think to do at all, really. And I want to talk about objective and subjective in a minute, but I wanted to say that, for example, like my inferior TI, I feel like I know what people's types are. It works for me. I talk to Crystal. I believe myself. Like I don't, and I don't even care to convince people a lot of the times. I don't know what you would say about that. I'd like to hear your thoughts on FE. But I made a video once about why I don't care about arguing. And it's because I don't care if you agree with me. It works for me. I'll only share with you my opinion if you ask, if you're curious about getting to know me. I'm not going to try and tell you to convince you. And that's confusing even for TPs. I don't know if what your thoughts would be on that, but that's something that I noticed that people are confused by me, which I would call my very bad I neglect TE in almost every way. How would you conceptualize of that?
The way I look at it is like we in the personality community, it's like a church or a beehive where we all have different roles. And so like I'm in the natural cures community. I use vitamin C. I use different supplements to help with my health, but like I'm not on the front lines of like making that scientific or objective. I go on Amazon, I buy certain supplements, they help me with my health. Science doesn't believe they're objective. Mainstream doesn't believe they're objective. They work for me. I'll tell my friends about it, but I don't really care. I'm not going to devote my life to making some supplement mainstream scientifically accepted, you know, but I'm still in that community. So it's like, for the most part, like most people that are in whether the personality community, self-help, self-growth, or natural cures or whatever, no, your job is not to go all the way up to be one of the aggressive bees that are now pushing to make this scientific. But still in that community, in that church community, there's kind of a role for everybody, you know, and like where I've landed, not only for my role in this community, but my job of how I pay the bills is going to be like my life's work is going to be focused in on taking this personality stuff and pushing it aggressively to be more scientifically accepted. Now, that's not for everybody. Now, if somebody gets really, really into it and they have the fight to kind of do that, then yeah, join us. But that doesn't, you know, one
Yeah.
thing does not lead to the other, you know?
Yeah.
To be in the
So
community and like, because what you were describing,
yeah.
that's who I am when I take the lab coat off. During the day, I'm very subjective. I use it very willy-nilly. I don't follow my checklist. I see somebody walking down at the park and I go, oh, they look like an ENFP. And I just, you know, I just do all the bullshit like everybody else and it works for
Yeah.
me, you know? And that's,
Yeah.
you know, that's fine 99% of the time.
Well, what would you say to someone like me that does not personally care about it becoming scientifically accepted? I mean, I do care. It's more so that I know that that's not my role, because
Right.
I personally don't care and I'm not good at doing that, and I am not going to argue you about it. How can
Yeah.
people like me that might be more subjective by nature, or I don't even know if that would be accurate, but I am more interested in using this as a tool to help people to start really thinking about who they are.
Right. Right.
That is what matters to me.
Right.
Like, and I've worked with a couple people one-on-one where they have wanted me to type them, and I don't have the system like you. I mean, I could, I mean, that's still debatable, but for me, I'm happy when I feel like the person is critically thinking about who they are and getting rid of their own biases
Right.
and
Right.
comfortable with who they are is really all I care about.
Right. Right. That's exactly how I am with the Enneagram, for example. The
Mm-hmm.
Enneagram or even socionics or astrology, like I will use those as tools to start conversations or explain how I'm feeling or someone else is feeling, but I'm not going to be the pioneer poster boy for Enneagram. I'm not going to fight to make that scientific either way. I'll just
Yeah.
use it as a tool, jump in, jump out. So I think for most people, that's really a good spot to be.
Well, how can people like me that want people like you to make it scientific support you without being a scientist, if that makes sense?
Yeah,
I feel like I'm a
absolutely.
philosopher. Like, I feel
Right.
like I just want to say, this is what I think, and plant seeds in people's heads.
I've learned in life, in business, like disclaimers up the ass. It works so
Yeah.
great. You just say, hey, this is just my opinion. It's my opinion that you are exhibiting Enneagram wing 5 characteristics. I'm not an expert. I'm not here to prove it. I'm just saying this little paragraph here on Enneagram number 5 might be interest to you. That's it. And like people can really respect that if you're labeling it that way, and you're not making any promises, like when the supplement companies, right? They go, look, this may or may not help you. This is not FDA backed up. Some people like this, some people don't. You're on your own. Disclaimer. And like, that's the safe way to do it. Where the personality community has gotten in trouble, where we as a community, no matter who we are, need to back away from, is these large, grandiose claims that are not backed up by science. That's where the outside world and the scientists will come in and kick our ass. They don't care if we're using any personality thing or self-growth thing or any kind of supplements, as long as we're like, hey, this subjectively works for me. I'm not saying this is the answers from God or science, then they're going to leave us alone. So that's the only thing that I really encourage people to do is, for me, I'm a fan of the Enneagram, but I'm not using it or pushing it objectively and scientifically. I make sure to attach that disclaimer in case there's any evil scientists watching me when I say that, you know, so they don't cause any fights.
Yeah. And I so don't care about something being scientific for me to decide what I think.
Same with me in most areas of my life. Same deal. I'll accept a lot of things that are subjective and not scientific, and they absolutely work for me, and I'm totally fine with it.
But I do get annoyed and bothered when people look down on me or the community as being pseudoscience, where I'm like, well, I think it's something here. I don't have the time to convince you. You can look into the nuance if you'd like, but up to you.
Right.
And I think that part of that, and that's where FE and TI is like a package deal, is, well, for me, I also like astrology, but I don't talk about it as much on my channel. I think that people, if they're not already interested in, if they don't value this, then they aren't going to care anyway. And I guess I assume that those that do value these sorts of things are going in and finding the information for themselves in some ways, but I don't know. So
one thing that's helping with that, so you're kind of talking about like the extroverted decider, whether it's FE or TE, we're all going to be bothered in a safer state or demon state, doesn't matter, where you're going about with your beliefs, and then there's some jackass out there that's arguing with you, accusing you of this, that, or the other thing.
Yeah.
You're like, no, that's not, you just want to grab them by the neck and set them straight, right?
Yeah.
I remember one thing that really helped me before we started this business. It was one of the hardest things I had to do. Was like, if you go dig around on our website, and we hide a lot of the pages and stuff and make the website kind of hard to use on purpose, but like down on the website, like down on the like about us page or mission page or somewhere in there, like it's basically like statements of faith. Like if this was a church, like I wrote out what we believe, why we believe it, our stance, and screw you if you're not on board. And so like for me, it took me like a year to write all this stuff out, because it was all this arguing in my head with all the critics. And I was just more like, okay, look, here's what we believe and why. Here's our story. Here's how we came to these conclusions. Here's what we did. And like it forced me to write this out in the sensory. Again, it took me like a year to do this. And it's like,
so relate to things taking so long. I actually just added rules to my Facebook group after, I think, 10 months.
It took longer than 10 minutes, huh? Yeah. But like writing it out really helped me kind of settle the arguing in my head of what we're doing, and the people, because all day long, I'll get comments and messages of everything you're getting. Oh, that's not science, or you're pseudoscience, or this is wrong, or this, that. Like, how do I deal with that at scale? I got to deal with that before I get out. Otherwise, as we go, there's going to be more and more of that, and eventually you'll get crushed by it. So it was taking some time out, writing out statements of faith, writing out what we believe, writing out all of our stuff, and going, okay, here's what we stand on. And my job is not to prove it to everyone. That's why we have the class and the YouTube even. It's like, look, if you're in our group, I will work with these people in this group, but my job is not to explain to wacky ass Sally on some buried Reddit forum somewhere and explain it to her because she just jumped on. Like that is
my problem.
I've disconnected from that.
That's my problem, where wacky Sally is everywhere. There are multiple, and they all want my attention.
I know.
And I give it to them.
I know. I've been there. Yeah.
Yeah, and we even talked about this before. But that's what is so hard for me, and that is my tribe versus self, is that wacky Sally's part of the tribe, okay?
Right, yeah.
And that keeps demanding my attention.
Right, yeah. For me, I had to go through it. I had to go through it for a lot of years. I'm really thankful for the RC business that I had before, where I had to just...
Tell us about this, and you don't have to go so in depth, but something I know about you is that you are not new to YouTube, even though DaveSuperPowers has sort of like been a kind of full blast this year. You're not new to digital media or any of that. So tell us about that.
Yeah, I was working at Gold's Gym Pasadena in 2004, and my marriage at the time was starting to fall apart, which eventually it did. And I didn't know what I wanted to do in life. I was in my mid-20s at the time. And a friend of mine said, hey, you should get out of the gym and you should start your own business. And I'm like, well, what the hell would I start my business on? He's like, I don't know. You like RC airplanes. Why don't you do an internet business on that? I'm like, that's a great idea. He's like, no, wait, slow down. Like, read some books first, read E-Myth. He literally told me to read E-Myth. It was out at the
I'm
time.
reading E-Myth now, and do you want to know something funny? Is that I
Huh.
was cleaning out my Google Docs,
Yeah.
and I found a Google Doc notes from 2 years ago, the first
Uh-huh.
time that I called you,
Yeah.
and I had in all caps, read E-Myth.
Right? It's like the first thing I tell you.
That's what you told me.
Yeah. It's the
And
first thing he told me. It's the first thing I tell everyone
oh
to
my
this
God.
day.
I
Yeah.
was in a work meeting at my new job, and I was telling them, you know why McDonald's is successful?
Right.
And I was talking about the hamburger.
They're like, oh boy, here comes the E-Myth person.
Oh my God. That's a whole
Yeah.
other thing is, I'd love to talk with you at some point too, but the entrepreneur versus, manager and
Yeah.
all that. 'Cause I see how that fits with type in certain ways too.
Sure. Yeah.
Anyway, didn't mean to cut you off there.
Yeah, so we got into RC airplanes in 2004, and I started in the forums, RC groups, Wattflyer got kicked off of because I was such a jackass. But like, we were just kind of designing and selling RC airplane kits, and then we started doing YouTube videos in 2007, 2007 and 8, and saw YouTube and social media kind of starting to start up. Now, I was the last one to be on the internet. Like, I didn't have an email. I was very anti-internet. And so it was my ex-wife at the time, or my wife at the time, and like other people are like, hey, you should start doing video. Hey, you should probably get on this new YouTube thing. And we got on YouTube because of the file sharing format, because you just had like media player or Windows, whatever. And so it's hard to share videos at the time, but now there's this public video hoster called YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why we got on it. Like, just everything wrong, right? And then the RC airplane channel, we started putting more into it and started growing. So we got millions of views from 2008, 9, and 10, and then put a lot of focus into, okay, wait a minute, there's something different here. Screw these RC airplanes. There's something about business and social media. That's what I really want to learn. And so I focused in using the RC airplane business as my practice realm, knowing that I wanted to get into something else more important eventually. I didn't know what it was, which eventually became personality types. So I just focused on learning systems and manager and entrepreneur and scalability and how to write shows and edit and create and set up all your cameras and all that kind of stuff. And I just spent 10 years in the dungeon just figuring all that out, which is why then when we launched the personality business in January of 2018, it just comes out straight up out of nowhere. It's been, been working on it for 10 years.
Yes. And I think that, and you've touched on this in some of your videos, I think that a lot of people might compare themselves to what they might see out there. And it seems like people just come out of nowhere.
I know, right?
And in your recent video about how people aren't successful until after like years. And and that sort of also, correct me if I'm wrong, but the sense I get from a lot of your typing process is that you put an emphasis on the amount of time invested in these actual things, the amount of hours clocked doing these things. Like, you say you're a feeler, but how often are you doing that?
Right.
I think that is a game changer
Yeah.
because a lot of us don't even realize like what we're doing in our autopilot.
Right.
That just seems like our default. And then other things that we do feels like we're doing when we don't even acknowledge that sometimes. So.
Absolutely. So I've been in personality types for about 20 years now. I got into it in 1999. And it was just this year that I realized that I'm actually more of an extrovert than an introvert, or at least an ambivert. Like, I had pictured myself for 20 years as being extremely introverted until, Shannon and other people are like, hey, look at yourself on the camera, look at yourself at breakfast time, look at yourself at night. It's like 10 o'clock at night and I'm working out. Like, where am I getting all this energy? Like, I'm constantly running around and beating on the outside world. And like, for me, I'm just looking at myself. Oh, I'm quiet. I'm tired. I'm drained. Sure. But I wasn't looking at, when you pull out a stopwatch and measure how many hours a day am I beating on the outside world? It's a lot. It's more than I'm not. I didn't realize that until this year.
Question about that. So I know your type is not necessarily a secret, but if you were to compare you and me, I'm talking about everything through my lens. Like, I'm an ENFJ, so that's why I think blah, blah, blah. And you just say these facts without any sort of like, and I know that because I use NI and blah, blah, blah. So tell us, like, what is your type, or how has that changed over time, like since you've gotten introduced to all this stuff?
Yeah. Yeah. So my type is INTJ, but I'm NI-FI. So what does that mean? Like, defining our terms, if you're in the Myers-Briggs, you know the 16 types. So this is really easy. And people relate to this. Like 50% of the people out there, their savior functions are not their top two. So for you, it's FE and NI. Half the ENFJs out there are FE and SE. So they skip their NI. And so they're gathering the sensory rather than organizing the abstract. And half the INTJs out there are NITE. They're standard Myers-Briggs INTJ. And then half the INTJs are NI-FI. And where you can catch them is the NI-FIs are kind of arrogant, self-above tribe assholes that, like, I'm not prioritizing the tribe's reasons in the spectrum. I'm not prioritizing the TE first. I don't give a shit about everybody's fucking reasons and 10 people. And all that. I'm like, I'm taking that into account later. I'm doing what I want to do. And then I'm checking the spectrum. And so you kind of feel that from me and see in my videos, like, yeah, he is kind of a self-arrogant asshole. Like, yeah, that's how you catch it. Like, you're not going to catch it on like, well, is he using TE or not? Oh, I'm using TE to get done what I want to get done. I'm using it as a slave for the
So
FI,
I have a question about that. So when you say savior, does that mean that your FI is stronger than your TE? Do you use your FI first? Or do you think that's more just like from an emotional standpoint, you value it,
It's way stronger.
you care about it? Would you say that your process goes NI, FI, TE then?
Yeah.
Because I guess that's where I am not sure what I think. And I have a question for you as well, is that a lot of people talk about looping. They've been talking about looping for years. And the connotation there is that is unhealthy.
Right.
So I guess I personally, if I were to say my thoughts on that, is that it would be more balanced. And I don't even want to say healthy, but more balanced perhaps, for if people did go by the standard of NI then TE or something. So do you I'm curious your case, because I know a lot of people out there would say that looping is unhealthy. I don't even know if I would say it's unhealthy, because I definitely do see people doing it in healthy ways. What is your case for that being healthy or just not just as healthy? Because I'm not really quite sure. I tend to have seen the order from 1 to 8 making a lot of sense for me.
Right. For a lot of people, it does. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. But then again, it's like, for example, like, I don't know if you personally have typed Crystal as much as the order. I think her TE is very strong compared to some ENFPs. Right. And I've noticed how she has used TE over FI in some scenarios.
Right. Yeah, we see that. Yeah.
You see, so do you see her as play, or do you
I think so. So watch it. This is how we do it. So my opinion, based on what I've seen of your friend Crystal, right? That's what we're talking about, is that she is probably consume play, which would have that activated TE. Now she's still savior FI, but her TE is activated. Now that's my opinion. I would then have Shannon watch her and then see what Shannon got, and that's where we would then see. And that's how exactly how we found, just kind of interrupt here, that's how we found the loopers, is that when we were trying to type people, we couldn't do it. We couldn't type the 16 because 50% of the population were like, what's wrong with this guy? Why is this ENFJ? They're not organizing. Why is this ENFJ not? These ENFJs are, and these aren't. What is going on? And we couldn't get the numbers like the scientists have been saying about Myers-Briggs for decades. Once we realized there was 32 types, not 16, now the numbers started to flow. Now we could objectively type people. And then now with the looping in particular, we went back to the forums like, that's right. We've heard about the introvert talk about, especially like the INFJ. I just remember like the INFJ, the NITI loop. Yeah. So it's like, okay, wait, hold on. I would want to go back specifically in context, because looping in general is now this massive subject, I would want to go, what are we talking about in particular? Because in that person's case, maybe they're NITI as saviors and they're totally healthy, they're normal, leave them alone. Maybe they're a double extrovert in a demon swing and they got a problem, or maybe, who knows? Like, so now, like,
that's the thing. My NITI has looped before, but I don't think that's,
Exactly. So the context, now it's like, I've had to learn because I'm kind of like you were like, or I think a lot of people like, I want to like kind of figure out, solve the whole puzzle at once. I'm now learning like, wait, I gotta stop. Hold on. Bring me a specific case of looping. Let me look at that one. That only proves this one. Okay, SI, bring me the next one. It's just exhausting. But that's how I would do it.
Sorry. Finish. Yeah. I have a question that relates to this. Did you want to finish your thought?
I finished. That's it.
Okay. What's the difference between activated versus savior? Because didn't you're blast, or you have a blast activated, so and that's what makes you feel more like an extrovert,
right? Exactly.
So what's the difference between activated and a savior? So
this is for anybody just listening or following, it's gonna be very hard for them to follow, but like the way this is all like, it's very complicated now because we're tracking personality not out of 16, we're tracking on a spectrum of 512. So when Shannon and I are getting the same number, we're getting people out of 512, and so it goes 16 types to 32 to 64 to 128, 256, 512, and sometimes we're not able to track all the way to 512. Where we go, there's somewhere I can only track them to 64, and I'm not sure of the extra stuff. Whatever. The point of activated is that everybody has two savior functions. So you have to have a savior observer and a savior decider. That's simple, right? You have two observers and two deciders. You have a right hand and a left hand. One's got to be dominant. You got a right foot and a left foot. One's got to be dominant. So you have a dominant foot and a dominant hand, a dominant observer and a dominant decider. And then from there, for myself, let's say I have NI as my dominant observer and FI as my dominant decider. Now, out of the two demons that are left, the TE and the SE, which one of them is the alpha between the two of those? And for me, in my case, the TE is the dominant demon, or the activated over the SE. So we're kind of looking of like, what is the order, I think for yourself, I think if you're blast play, I don't have the math in front of me, but I think it would be SE activated, I think would be the dominant demon. I'd have to write it all out, but like, so we're looking at of the demons, which one is more activated. So for example, you see a lot of EJs, they're two middle observers. One is a savior, one is a demon, but the demon one is usually activated. So it's like you, for example, you're not like off the charts ridiculous when it comes to SE compared to like an INTJ or an INFJ, where SE is just gone, like your SE is somewhat activated. You're able to gather in enough facts that you're then organized. And so that'd be an example of like an activated demon. Even me right now, as I'm blasting and using a lot of TE explanation, my TE is not my savior, but it's activated enough that I'm using it all day long.
So how would you, if you now are seeing yourself as more of an extrovert, then how does that fit with your type then?
So
if you use NI and FI then the most.
Yeah, this is where I wish I would have paid more attention in school and stuff. Like, cause like by the time we charted this all out, it just created these beautiful bell curve spectrums. So out of all the types, INTJ, INFJ, ENFJ, whatever, there's a spectrum. So for the INTJ, we're tracking 32 INTJs. There'll be extremely introverted INTJs and extremely extroverted INTJs.
So just to clarify, do you mean extroversion by sort of the big five extroversion definition?
Not really. No.
Because to me, I notice a huge difference between how Carl Jung talks about extroversion as in interacting with the objective world.
More like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because if I were to have known nothing about type through college and all this, I would have probably told you that I was an extrovert and that I'm now an introvert.
Sure.
But I still know I'm an extrovert because I know how these things work.
Yeah.
But I think whenever I was in high school, I definitely was using my play a lot more. I
Yeah.
was afraid to be alone. I like needed to
Right.
be talking to someone all day, every day. And now I'm more comfortable saying no to people to work on my own
Right.
projects. And so to me, from my perspective, that makes me feel like, oh, I'm so introverted. I haven't gone out in like a month.
Yeah, yeah, you know, yeah, totally, totally. It's one reason why myself, like, I've kind of stopped using the term introvert or extrovert to define a person, because I see it as like describing a car. It's either clean or dirty, fast or slow. It's like, what context? Like, maybe it's a truck and it's slow on the freeway, but it's fast going up a hill. So it's like you can't say, like, because a lot of ENFPs, they're consumed sleep, so they're extremely introverted, even though their first function is extroverted, and they will be clarified as an extrovert in the Myers-Briggs, but their predominant energy is ridiculously introverted. So now what? So it's like, I've kind of learned to like clarify subparts. You know, my demon external observer of SE is an extroverted function. When I'm blasting, I'm in an extroverted state, you know, so I'll give it specific, like, that's why you're saying yourself, you're like, yeah, at this time in my life, I'm predominantly in an introvert zone. Like,
Yeah.
yes, my first function may be extroverted, but that isn't
Mhm.
you. You know, you are not an extrovert, you know, necessarily. So
Yeah.
I have kind of, that's why when people say, oh, introvert, extrovert, like, I think a lot of times now, what was very clumped together, we're starting to see that there's a lot of specific parts that are forming the whole. So
Mhm.
if you have somebody that is play, blast, consume, double masculine, they're going to have extreme extroverted energy. And you'll want to call the sum of that an extrovert, even though it's a lots of little parts coming together. And when you change those parts out, things change. So,
Mhm. I
yeah.
think that I know personally, just from growing up being in like improv comedy and stuff, I think I know a lot of ENFJs that are the SE
Yeah.
subtype. Would you call it a subtype, or would you just call it FESE?
Yeah. I just call it
But
type. Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like I literally know so many FESE plays,
Yeah.
and they all think they're ENFPs.
Yes.
They all took the 16 personality type, and they were like, "OMG, Megan, you're really into this. I'm an ENFP."
Right.
And I'm like, "Oh gosh, no."
But they're so FE though. Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of these people knew me and Crystal in college, and I would be like, "Which one of us do you relate to more?" And they'll be like, "Well, definitely you. Like, she makes no sense." And I'm
Yeah.
like, "Well," and they're like, "Well, I'm just a P because I'm all over the place." And I'm like,
Right.
so
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
That's what helped us out so much, coincidentally, is that when we were really studying this, my business partner at the time was almost the exact same type as me, but he was INTJ NITE. And
Mhm.
he'd been in Myers-Briggs since forever. And then Shannon's son, he
Mhm.
is also TESE. So Shannon is TESE. So in the house, we had two TESEs and two INTJs, and the INTJs were slightly different. And that was a big thing. They were like, how are these two guys both INTJs?
Yeah.
Why is the one guy always caring about the extroverted world, TE, and the other guy is not? And it was going, what is the difference here? And that's how we started kind of digging around and finding it.
Is it possible to be any of the animals with any of the types? Like,
Yeah.
could you be a sleep ENFJ?
I know. I'm sorry. No. Right.
Okay. So
You could
three
be.
of
You
the
could be. You could be blessed sleep. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So your first one, like for example, as an ENFJ, I could be either blast or play as my
Right.
top.
Right. Right.
But then your second one, because there, this sketch comedy group, I swear, was full of ENFJs, and they were all different, and
Right.
we didn't all like each other. Like it was like honestly really fun, and it was funny for Crystal, the ENFP, to observe, because she was like, "You guys are like pretty much all the same. Like I don't really understand like the drama, but like
Yeah.
uh." But anyway, so okay, so I asked my group on Facebook for some questions, and
Yeah.
I'd like to understand a little bit more about this, because personally I don't know, like, how, like, because okay, maybe this is just my either hesitance to make a stand of what I think, and also hesitance to, I feel like it'll come to me after more years of thinking about these things.
Right.
But it seems to me that mental illness plays a role, and some people I will say, uh, there's a lot of talk about what's healthy and what's unhealthy. as far as types go. And I know that a lot of people might think that this sort of looping is unhealthy. So I want to know, why do you think, or what's your case for that being healthy? Is it more so that you've just observed it being true in scale, or what would you say?
Yeah, the thing that has been our authority is the growing data set. So once we created a assembly line of being able to objectively get clean data, meaning if you're wanting to build a data set of 100 people that you have typed, what has been the challenge for decades up until this point, even Dario Nardi was dealing with this issue of like, how do you know it's a clean data set? How do you know this person's an ENFP or INFP? Like, you have no systematic scientific way to filter through that data and get clean data sets. Once we had finally killed ourselves to figure out this objective game, we could start to create an objective way of filtering people in. And then the ones that we were typing right, that we were getting the same numbers as, we would then start piling them up in these data sets. And then from there, we would splinter them off into their different Google Docs of their different types. And then we just left it alone. And for a few years, we just let that clean data set build up. And so we, like, for say any type, say an INFP, we have no idea what a healthy INFP is, an imbalanced one or whatever. But once we have a doc that now we've got 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 INFPs that have all been objectively, typed and categorized, it's now in that larger data set. That's when you start to kind of see the average. For example, you get a new car or a new smartphone and you can like do what the guy at the store tells you to do or read the manual, but you're still like, I don't know, is this right? How do you really know how your smartphone works? It's when you go on a forum where there's 20 other people that all have the same phone and they're all communicating, okay, here's the ups and downs, here's the average of how this phone works. So it's like, we've been getting the best information from the data set and from that average.
Like you care more about a clean data set than being right.
Yes, because I'm constantly wrong. I'm constantly wrong. And that's like this, like, welcome to the scientific process, which was hard at first because you have all these theories, you're a big know-it-all, and then like you start stacking up the data and you're like, wow, that isn't true. And to the point now where I'm just like big time, like, I don't know anything. Don't ask. I'll give you my opinion, but wait for the data to come in,
I definitely would agree with you 100% that about half of the people use like their tertiary function. Myers-Briggs would call it. I just think that maybe I have trouble not enforcing my own TI. It should be this way.
Right.
Onto things.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this is how an ENFJ who's healthy should look or something. Like, so you've talked a lot, you've criticized subjective typing, and a lot of people online that I see all the time, myself included, suggest self-study and researching the types on your own and thinking for yourself. What would you say to that? Because your criticism of that, I don't know if you'd even call it a direct criticism, but that is one of the things that I agree with pretty much 99%, almost everything that you say, that I've seen, I agree with. But that is the thing that I think makes me directly stop and pause and be like, what am I doing wrong? And makes me really check myself.
Yeah.
So what would you say to that?
Yeah, I would say one thing that we're up to, our goal is towards the scientific community. We are looking to cause a fight between the personality community and the scientific community. We want to aggravate people and get discussions and stuff. We want to punch the personality community in the face first because they have been abused by the scientific community from all of our bad practices. So for what I'm saying is, like, I purposely am kind of an aggressive, pushy guy on the YouTube, the weekly YouTube stuff, to create discussion and a fight and accountability of like, hey, we as a community have invited in a lot of kind of subjective practices that are making us look bad in front of the scientific community.
Yes.
Because if we really have what we think we have, which I believe we do have, then we got to start being a little bit more responsible. So like, as we as a community are kind of getting ready for not being picked on, the Voxes and the scientific community that are coming out with articles monthly about how the Myers-Briggs is bullshit. Because as we're getting ready to kind of deal with that, as a community, we got to be able to have our objective way of looking at things. So that's one side. That's largely what I'm thinking about when I'm kind of causing fights out there. Take the lab coat off, turn around back into just the self-growth community. It's like, oh yeah, absolutely. Like study the types, study yourself,
Okay.
really get to know these yourself. Like, because like eventually, objective or not, you've got to find what works for you. You've got to
I
find,
don't own a lab coat. I'm not putting.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Like, because so you're talking about how it really is about your purpose of what you're trying to do that matters more.
Yeah, because we as a personality community, we have abused and overdone the subjective, read it, feel good about it, resonate with yourself. As much as that is true, we as a community have abused that. We've done that so much that the outside world is calling us on it. That's still a very important part of the tool. We've all gone through it. I mean, that's how I'm using this stuff personally. You know, it's how we use it in real life for our actual self-growth. You've actually got to resonate with the information. But at the same side, we are in a position to be more objective and to work with others to kind of get an objective thing. So don't type yourself just upon yourself. Ask 10 of your friends. Get an outside perspective. Try and flush out the peacocking effect. Because if you're an IJ, you probably think you're an EP. Chances are, statistically, what we're seeing, we're getting so good now, we can actually start to predict what type you think you are. So you come to us as an INFP, and we can usually predict you probably think you're this type, don't you? Right? Because people are seeing themselves consistently upside down and backwards. Why not check for that on the front end?
Well, what is it about people like me who you could say got my type right at age 17? I mean, we don't know if we're right, but like, what is it about people that have not really questioned their type much?
Yeah. Yeah. And then we'll go up and type you and come up with ENFJ as well. You know, for most of the people we see in the personality, not saying most, maybe most, I'd say probably close to half at least that are doing personality videos are not the same type that we typed them as. You know, not saying who's right or wrong, but there's not consistency there. A good question of like, I'm not sure why some people are able to look at the Myers-Briggs profiles and look at themselves and get a accurate match according to our point of view. I can tell you why a lot of people get it off. A lot of people get it off because they'll socially latch on to a type. So their best friend was INFJ, INFJ was popular, and they unconsciously want to be an INFJ. That really catches people up.
Yes.
Or there'll be a negative or positive stigma, so they'll be unconsciously trying to avoid. A lot of it too, and we see this in our son Cody at 8 years old, we tend to peacock what is hard for us. So like, you know, you're not going to show off like, hey, I went to a coffee shop and I saw somebody was feeling bad and I cared about it. I'm not going to, you know,
exactly.
That's obvious.
That's something that maybe if everyone is getting their type backwards, that's why people have typed me incorrectly on
stuff
YouTube.
Like that. Yeah.
Because
Stuff like,
for me, I'm sure you've noticed, I'm super proud of myself when I have some sort of TI idea.
Exactly.
And this channel in general is for me to exercise my TI in a lot of ways.
Yes.
You guys don't all know that I have like 15 friends that I'm talking to at all times. You know what I mean? Like, I am so connected to the FE that I don't even feel like I have to explain it.
Exactly. When we're objectively typing people, we throw out probably more people than we take in the sense of like, if we're going through somebody like your videos, for example, and we're looking at, is this somebody just coming to the camera at certain times in certain states in the same bedroom with the same setting? That's probably when they're in this one kind of peak zone of they're just sharing these one or two functions. It's hard to tell what are they really like. So it's the YouTubers that show themselves at the party, crying in their bedroom, hanging out with their friends, doing video games, doing drugs, going through a depression, where you get the whole spectrum of their life. Oh, those are so much easier to track because you can see the whole thing. It's very hard to really get to know somebody just through these edited little snippets.
Oh yeah, for sure. So, so you would say that self-study is good for self-growth, but you would caution against being like attaching too much to what you think.
Yeah, because we as a personality community tend to make that mistake so much that the outside world is calling us on our bullshit. So I would encourage the personality community, do the self-growth, do the self-evaluation, look at the types, look at the information, look at yourself. That's the most important thing. But also do know you do have access to these objective tools. You can ask your friends and family to get some outside perspective. And if 9 out of 10 people say, no, dude, you're actually controlling and not chaotic, you might take that into account. That's it.
Yeah. And my opinion that I'll share is that I have noticed that it seems like FI users attach a lot to what they're feeling and they identify with it
and try and pry it from their hands, right?
And I've had a hard time. I've at least noticed a lot of FI users not knowing what their type is because identity is so important to them, and they view themselves in this way, and it's really hard to take it from them.
Yeah.
Because that's how they view themselves. And so I've already noticed that and seen that. But what I'm getting from you, it almost feels like a TE criticism of TI, where it's like, sure, that works for you guys, but objectively we're being laughed at because we can't explain what this is. And I personally think, and one of your videos on your website, which check out his classes, by the way, I'll link all that below. You were talking about how a lot of people will just be like, well, this resonates as true to me.
Right.
And that's exactly what I do. And all the time, that's how I think. And I really think that a lot of TI users would relate to that, even though we all do this. I mean, maybe you don't link that with TI. I don't know your thoughts, but
yeah, it could be more. It could be several things. Could be NF.
Yes.
Low consume, whatever. Could be a lot of different things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think everybody goes through that to some extent, some more than others.
Yes.
And the way I'm looking at it is like, if we as a personality community actually have some keys to psychology here, these objective tools are ours. We can use those as well. You can use them a lot or a little, but like, we no longer need to put up with the scientific community coming in, barging into our territory saying, hey, you guys suck. You're not objective. You're not scientific. Like, actually, we're aware of that and we're working on that. And, we have people that specialize in that. And that's something that we are now responsible for, because doing the subjective, hey, this relates to me, that's one of our tools. It doesn't have to be the only tool for the community at whole,
Yeah, because for me, I am working on a master's in psychology now, and it's actually extremely hard for me to read these things because I'm like, why are you measuring that? Why does it matter? I don't see how it matters. I don't see how it makes my life better, all these things.
Yeah.
And that's been something that's extremely hard for me to do. And it seems like, I don't know, I just don't relate to that desire to play the game. But at the same time, I respect you so much for doing it. And so I find that interesting, and it makes me wonder, am I wrong?
There's different people, different roles in the church, different roles in the beehive. Like, we need a lot of people on the front lines of like, hey, look, we don't have time to theorize it, science about it. We got to be down here right now with the technology we have available, helping people now. And if somebody's going to bring a new updated version later, great, bring it on in when you got it. But we need somebody doing the work now,
Wait, okay. This makes me realize that I feel like TE is quick to try and make judgments of like, this is more efficient. I don't need to think through everything. This works. Or okay, well, I mean, you do think it through, but TE is more focused on the immediacy of solving this problem. Like, oh, science thinks we're stupid, I want to solve this. Where for me, I'm like, people need help, and I want to help people in the quickest way.
Right.
That
we're all little termites with different specialties going in different directions.
I'm just afraid of being a guru. I'm afraid of being a guru, like you talk about.
When you do the disclaimer thing, it can get you through so much, and that's still what I do, because I am a guru for the majority of the day. I just put in fine print, I'm going into guru mode, and it's totally fine when you tell people this is my opinion at this point in time, and it's extremely useful. And the scientific community respects that, as well as everybody else. So that's what I do with the guru thing, is just putting a disclaimer that this is my opinion at this point in time, and people respect that.
Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to look at these, and I know I'm trying to wrap up soon to like respect your time. I'm trying to look at these questions to see if there's anything.
Yeah, what do you got?
Cover. Um, oh, in your opinion, what did the Myers-Briggs get right?
The two ladies, the original
Yeah.
Myers-Briggs.
Yes.
I think it's, I think it is. At night, I will think of like, wow, how did Carl Jung and Myers and Briggs come up with these 8 functions and these 16 types out of nowhere? Like, I feel like our job in today's community with technology and everybody else, and it's a little bit easier to put the parts together. We haven't really created anything. We've just kind of finished the puzzle that they started from, my, again, disclaimer, my opinion, my perspective. Um, so the fact that Carl Jung with the 8 functions and then Myers-Briggs that really kind of getting these 16 types down, I think is just, it's mind-boggling that they did that. And that they were right. That, in my opinion, that when this game is over, when psychology sees that the 8 functions are actually tracked and the 16 types are in the code, out of the 512, it divides down into the original Myers-Briggs 16 types. I think it's going to be hilarious that as much as Carl Jung and Myers-Briggs in particular get their ass kicked, that the 16 types, in my opinion, are real and they're scientifically, objectively can be tracked. So
Do you think that we can continue dividing up until infinity?
that is a great question. We have been unable to go farther than 512 at this time. But remember, you're talking to the guy who bought the domain tribe 128, because I thought it stopped at 128. I thought it stopped at 32. But so, like, real quick on that,
Yeah.
the way that divided out is when we were typing people. Once we were able to objectively type, we were logging people in 32 docs. And then what happens when we got a lot of ENFPs, we got more ENFPs than we could deal with. And when that ENFP doc got larger, what happened is, like, you would see patterns inside that one doc. Like, half of them would have red hair and half of them wouldn't. And we're like, what the hell? And so then we started to look at, like, why are these half of the ENFPs the same and these are not? And then we realized, oh, there's a second animal. It's not just that you're an ENFP consume, it's your ENFP consume play or play consume. And, then it would all just kind of unfold from 32 to 64. Oh, there's masculine, feminine, then a jump again. And then we kept unfolding it. And the docs were forcing that. So as the docs would fill up, we would start to see patterns within the docs, which would get us to think, and we go back to the math and look at it and go, oh, there's another one of these, another one of these. But now it's kind of stopped. Now it's, for now it's kind of stopped. Yeah.
Sometime, and that's interesting, because what I believe is that we will only be inspired sometimes so much as we could understand. Like, maybe once you like you didn't know those other types whenever you were still figuring out the 16. So who knows, maybe you still have some work to do on figuring out all of these, and then you get to 128, right?
Yeah.
So another question is, would you go into the feminine versus masculine? Or I don't want to ruin your YouTube schedule if some of that is
absolutely. Yeah, just real quick, it's like hilarious when you see it, because you can't not see it and you already see it. Like, masculine and feminine. It's exactly how the Bugs Bunny cartoons in the 1960s have very sexistly and racistly described. Like, there's masculine and feminine energy, and what we're able to track is that every function is either masculine or feminine. And so, and that comes with a coin. So my TE is feminine. The way that I'm communicating my ideas is feminine, and my FI, emotional state, is masculine. And then it's just a coin.
So is you the same way that, like, you can't have FE without TI and, like, FI without TE?
Right.
Is one masculine, feminine the same way? Like, I can't be both masculine, FE, and TI?
Correct. Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. And then, so from there, we're tracking, like, say we're typing you, we're like, okay, which one is masculine, which one feminine? Is it her FE that's masculine and TI is feminine, or the other way around? So we'll track that. But then what gets so fascinating and becomes a cross check, this is how we have cross checks in all the code. If this person is double masculine, meaning they're masculine extroverted decider and masculine sensory, here's where it gets crazy, then their modalities are going to be such. Their modalities are going to be kinesthetic audio and not visual tester. And that we can start to track by their body movements, their eye movements, their descriptions. just flat out their modalities and
So you
watching
said that
videos.
I was auditory,
More on the audio kinesthetic. Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
very true. And I mean, I've never told you that. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like that's interesting to me.
Yeah. So,
So
yeah.
so for those of you who don't know, I would be masculine FE.
Yeah.
And I think that honestly that can explain why some of you have been convinced that I was an ENTJ.
Right.
Can you explain what masculine FE looks like, just out of my curiosity?
Yeah. So both you and I and Gary Vaynerchuk have
Oh
masculine.
yeah.
You have masculine FE, and
Yes.
therefore feminine T. In your case, feminine TI. Let me talk about the feminine first.
Wait,
So
so pause. Do you type Gary Vaynerchuk as very similar to me then?
yeah, we typed him as FE SE.
Oh, okay. So he's
FE SE.
okay.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
pretty similar.
One of
Okay.
those jumping
Okay.
INFPs. So like the feminine functions. Talk about the feminine functions in regard to the feminine T. You and I have that in common. We both have
Mhm.
feminine T, and we both have feminine T as a demon. You have TI, you have TE. That's the only
Mhm.
difference. When it comes to our ideas, as feminine Ts, we are kind of how I'm presenting now, a little bit like delicate, a little weird.
Yeah.
Don't step on my ideas. These are mine. I've been working on them. Please don't hurt them. Don't bite them. Don't argue with them.
Yes.
But like, if you come over and sit in my favorite chair, fuck you. Get the fuck out of my chair. That's my chair. Shove. Masculine F. And so it's like,
Yeah.
when the masculine F is like, hey, this is that is not valuable. This is valuable. Punch. Like shoving and moving aggressively and confidently of like, I will fight you on the F, but I don't really want to fight you on the T. I'll dainty on the T,
Yes.
you know? It's fascinating to see the masculine FEs because they're able to very quickly and aggressively kind of distinguish what is good, what is bad, value-wise. And if somebody gets out of line, they're not afraid to just knock them back, you know?
Oh, yes. Yes.
So now there'll be a lot of relation with, that's why we're tracking the masculine extroverted decider, because masculine FE and masculine TE, by the end of the day, it ends up being very much the same. You have an extroverted decider savior that's shoving on the tribe extrovertedly and doesn't really want to engage, on the introvertedly. And so at the end of the
Yeah.
day, yes, the masculine FEs oftentimes are very much like a masculine TE. It's hard for us to type them sometimes. All we know is that's
Yeah.
EG masculine, and we don't really know what's what for a while.
Yeah, and one of the biggest biases that I've seen personally that personally affects me is when people don't understand the difference between FE in the ESFJ and FE in the ENFJ, and I think what you're talking about masculine and feminine describes it even better. But I don't like when people describe FE as super meek and like they'll do any like pushover. Like I'm just like
Yeah.
not a pushover. And
Right.
I never have been.
Right.
And one of my biggest things that I want to explain to people is how FE does not have to be that way. And that's where my feeling side has almost motivated me to want to make
Right.
videos, because I've been underestimated and all this, and people don't understand me and all that. And I think that your method of explaining that makes a lot of sense to people. But I don't know if have you found that certain types are more likely to have masculine or feminine, or are those even amongst?
That's a great question. It's actually technically, it's what we're tracking is 128 personality types with the overlap of 4 different sexual modalities. So for example, there are ENFJs out there that are your exact type: blast, play, sleep, or whatever order, right? And then there's a double feminine version of you, a feminine masculine, a masculine feminine, and a double masculine. So there's 4 different. And what's funny is when we look at them in the docs, they look very similar. Like all the double masculines look the same. All the double feminines will look like a feminine version of you. It's crazy, like how much people end up looking alike. So yeah, there's technically 128 types as far as the Carl Jung functions, and then 4 different versions of those sexual types. And no, we're not seeing any type being predominantly double masculine or double feminine or whatever. In fact, we're not seeing any real rarity of anything. Like we have tons of
Okay.
INFJs. INFJs are not rare. In our docs, the most rarest types are literally ISTJs and ISFJs, which are like according to the internet, a very large percent of the population. There's just not a lot of them on the internet / YouTube right now, which is where we're getting our data set. So our numbers are all,
so your data is not just, it's not just people that have come to you for typing. It's people you see on the internet as well.
The first 2,500 people we typed were all just people off of YouTube, celebrities, random or whatever. And then as of this year, 2018, we've been typing people that have come to us, I think 150 so far this year. So that's not very much. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense, because I've had people tell me that they think that I am more aggressive than most ENFJs, to where I want to say you should meet more ENFJs. Sure. I don't know if I really believe that, or if they maybe have only met.
You are more aggressive than your feminine counterparts. Yeah, and so like a lot of times, like it's very hard with our stereotypical mind. Like the first time somebody meets an ENFJ, if they meet a double feminine version, they instantly think all ENFJs are that way. It's like, no, all ENFJ double feminines might be kind of like that one person, but you got to see this whole spectrum. But our minds don't like spectrums. Our minds like black or white, masculine, feminine, good or bad. It's hard to like process a spectrum that is like blurring into the other. Oh, it messes with your mind.
And science likes spectrums, don't they?
Right. But our stereotypical ancient evolutionary mind doesn't like it. I was wearing a red shirt. I went to that watering hole. I got attacked by a lion. Therefore, it's that watering hole and this shirt. I'm never going to that watering hole or wearing this shirt again. Boom, done. That's how our minds. That's a big part of our training with the bias training and stuff, is like getting control of the stereotypes, the biases. For me, I've really seen a deep, dark, down to the darkness of like how racism and sexism and all that is part of who we are. Like I was hoping like in our lifetime we kind of like, educate people and be nice and kind of make that stuff like, oh, this is a part of a shortcut process that doesn't go away, but you can become more conscious of it. You can own it. You can set traps for it to try and catch it using the scientific process.
Do you mean sort of the me versus them, or like the us versus them sort of mentality?
You'll meet a type. I met my neighbor who was an ISFP and he was mean to me. Therefore, all ISFPs are mean. Like, boom.
Oh my God. Yeah.
That fast. Like, try and get that out of your head. It's so hard once your animal is spooked. This is happening unconsciously, because we would see it when we were typing people like, why can't Shannon ever get a person's type right if it's her dad? Because when she sees somebody comes through that's of that type that she has negative emotions to, her brain goes cuckoo. The hardest people that I remember,
that's so interesting.
Like the person I couldn't type was Howard Stern, because he's the double masculine version of me, and I couldn't see him. I don't like the guy, and my brain is like, can't be me, right? And so your brain is just taking you for a ride. It's really weird. It's really weird to watch.
So, gosh, I forgot what I was going to just say. So I have been accused in some of my videos of projecting my past experiences onto types. And I think everyone kind of can't help but do that. But I think that for me, at least how I approach it, and let me know if you disagree or see a flaw in this, but I feel like once you've had that bad experience or something with the type, then you have more information about the negatives of that type. And so at least the way that I have tried to explain things is, hey, like, this is what I've noticed through my experience. Not all are like that, but this is what I've noticed could happen to this type.
Yeah.
Would you say that mentality would be just being aware of it and trying to be in control of it? Or would you, because everyone has different opinions of how these stereotypes spread, but how would you, do you think that there's any value in talking about those things and being I
think what you're doing is exactly the right on. You just say, here's my, back to disclaimerville.
Yeah.
Here's my experience.
Yeah.
And just putting it out there of like, look, I'm just one data point on a whole graph of lots of other people. And that's been the real kind of safe way. And you're just acknowledging like, look, maybe I'm upside down, maybe I'm biased. I don't know. This is just my point of view at this point in time. This is what I went through. You add that disclaimer and you'll be amazed with how much shit you can get away with.
Yeah. For sure. Okay, so here's a question, and have you ever considered the possibility that 90% that the 90% reverse typing rate could be internally consistent to your method, yet an incongruence and
Smart guy there.
Let me read this again. Have you considered the possibility that a 90% reverse typing rate could be internally consistent to your method, but an incongruence and miscalibration between your system and the typing systems that are derived upon, rather than an epidemic or error? So the way I'm interpreting that would maybe be, maybe these people are typing themselves incorrectly because of your system, but maybe they're typing themselves correctly in that system.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah. The first thing is, you have the personality community camp, and then you have the ass kickers of the personality community, which is like the scientific community, or the Voxers, let's call them, right? So like, I am a member of both camps. So when the groups come to kick the ass of Myers-Briggs, I'm on their team too, because they will pull out the data from decades to say, hey, look, Myers-Briggs personality community, every time we come to town to test personality types over the decades in any way, shape, or form, objectively, you assholes can't meet any numbers. You're not scientific. You're not getting past 60%. You don't have consistency. Your numbers are pathetic. And they pump out article after article. And it's true. It's all true. So what the scientific community is saying in context is that already, it doesn't matter whose system or what system, people are not able to consistently type themselves or each other accurately or consistently at scale. Here's where most people just miss this.
Yeah, I definitely do.
You as an individual may have typed yourself correctly, but Sally and John next to you statistically probably didn't. It's the people at the whole. Like, it may work for you. You and your friend might have typed yourself right, but when thousands of people that are playing the typing game, that's when the numbers are falling out, that it's far below 60%. And that's where a lot of people miss it. Because like, me and my friends, we got ourselves right. This whole thing works. Like, hey, slow down. But at 10,000 other people, it's not working at scale, right? The thing that we have right now with Shannon and I is we have our system where we're getting the same number as each other out of 512, which is great, which is interesting. We're able to log people that we type. They end up looking alike. They end up talking alike. They have the same kind of health issues. So a lot of the data that we're collecting is very fascinating. In the end, though, it's still just a mom and pop trick, just me and Shannon. You know, we could have earpieces in each other's ears for all we know, right? So like, our next goal is to get 2 more people trained, and then 2 more. So now we have a group of like 10 people that now you can start putting them against each other and start getting more of a, an expanding that objective outlook. Because it's a great criticism to say, hey, maybe you and Shannon have got some bias feedback between each other and your system that you're not aware of. Like, yes, it's just me and her here. Maybe we do. So that's why you really want to.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So that's why our next step is to get more people trained to start putting them against each other. So me and Shannon are going to type this person. They're going to, so we can start getting a larger data set to see if it's really, if there's something really there.
Do you think that you and Shannon influence each other? Like, even if you're in separate rooms, do you think that knowing each other, maybe having similar worldviews, like similar enough worldviews to be, dating, and getting married, like it's similar enough that maybe you see things. So
totally. For example, we both, if a male walks by with hippie clothes and has red hair and a beard, both of us are going to say ENFP, because the large majority of ENFPs that we've typed that are male have red hair and a beard. And one of them is my brother, right? So like, both of us, whether this person is an ENFP or not.
My cousin has a beard, is an ENFP.
ENFP, there you go. So both of us, no matter what, are going to say that and do that. Or like, if we see somebody that looks like Tony Robbins, we're both going to be like, Tony Robbins. So absolutely, we're catching ourselves doing that all day long. And when we're typing clients, we've caught ourselves where we've both typed the client wrong. Because when we went back over their information and talked with the clients, we both typed them, not the entire type, but we got little parts of it, off, to where we were able to catch, like, wow, we both messed up, and we both messed up the same way. So it was exactly what they're saying.
Interesting.
Yes. The thing where there's the safety net, this is kind of where the science kind of view comes in. When you're dealing with statistics of a spectrum of 512, and you're dealing with hundreds of people that you're typing, the stones start to sift themselves through. There's going to be a lot of hits and misses. There's going to be a lot of errors that we do that are coincidentally get marked as a success, and it's just going to make it through the system, and they're wrong. We catch them on our docs from time to time. But when you're dealing with these large numbers of you're typing all these people on a spectrum of 512, the statistics are on your side that it's filtering out the majority, that there is something there that's interesting that's being tracked. So it again comes back to the numbers game of how many people we're typing on what kind of a scale that we're typing.
It seems to me like science, if you're playing the game right, then you could fail and you just try again because you're tracking it, right?
Right. Yeah. On our docs, if you ever get a chance to see them, like we will put asterisks by people's names where we've done a double blind test where we've typed somebody, like I'm thinking of like Bill Nye the Science Guy or whatever. We'll type him and then like we'll independently type him. We'll do it like all professionally and not half-assedly, which a lot of people, we type them half-assedly. And then we'll retype them again a couple of years later. So one of us will take it from the doc, hand it to the other person, say, hey, retype them, let me know what you got. And then we'll check to see a test retest. Did we still get the same, or did the one person at least still get the same type? And then if they are, we'll put an asterisk by their name to say, look, this person has been typed and retyped and they're more of a solid. A lot of them will even just put question marks by, you know? I think yours, I don't think we've officially typed. Like I've half-ass typed you, Shan's half-ass typed you, we throw you in the ENFJ doc and you don't have an asterisk because we haven't. So like we're aware of like, look, we have some that are as clean as we can. Some are very sloppy. And so again, back to Disclaimerville, we're just honest about it because our goal is that we want to invite long-term a third-party scientific group or organization to come to us, or we go to them, where they bring 10 people and they put us in separate rooms and they set up the experiment to their standards, to their liking, to where they're like, all right, if you guys can get X, 9 out of 10, 7 out of 10, or whatever that they set up, that if we can jump over that bar and produce what they're looking for, then we get a win. That's what we're setting ourselves up for. So we can mess up all day long, but if we're not aware of that, we're only hurting ourselves when we go to be tested by a college someday, you know?
Yeah. And so, you know how you said that groups of like 10 friends, like, hey, we all type each other correctly.
Right.
Do you think that even when it's not scientific, do you think that there's something to that of people getting together, like even if it's not scientific, do you think that when like looking back in the type community, that people being on forums, meeting people, talking about types, do you think that helps people understand and get typed correctly, just having the conversation, even if they aren't tracking it and all those things?
For a lot of people, yeah. Not for everybody, but yeah, for a lot of people, yeah. I think it's something to be said that we're living in a fast-moving scientific age, and this is a personality system that was around like World War II time, and it's still alive and well, and is only becoming more popular, even though science is kicking its ass all the time. Why won't it die? There's too many people going, look, I stumbled into this shit. I took some wacky ass personality test, and this stuff just fucking works. It helps me out. It helps my friend out. All the scientists and my teacher are kicking my ass for it, but I'm addicted to it because it works. Now, it isn't working for everybody, but why won't it die? My opinion, disclaimer, I think there's a lot of truth here. I think this truth is so powerful that even if you do it backwards, upside down, guru, self-type bullshit, you're still going to get a lot of value out of it.
Yeah, I personally just think that the main barrier is people not knowing themselves. And so that's what I do like about your method, is having an outside point of view. It becomes hard though when you don't know them. And that's what's hard, is that like, if you don't know them, then you might be wrong. But if you know them so much, then you're also biased. So that's confusing to me. So I'm going to just do a few more rapid fire questions and then we can end.
Great.
Does that sound good?
Yeah.
So, why does he consider an FINI type as a variation of an ISFP instead of calling it an INFP who uses control over gathering, seeing as if that person is demon sensing? If it were me, I would want to just flip the original 4-letter types altogether.
Right.
So,
I would say they're yes. We definitely wrestle with that. I would probably personally go with what they're saying. So an FINI, rather than an ISFP, calling them an INFP. Absolutely. We really discussed that kind of branding wise,
Yeah.
Myers-Briggs wise. We had to pick, you know,
Hmm.
but for the most part, I would call that person a NF. If that person came to us and typed themselves as an INFP, I'd be like, you're right. You're right. So I would say, yes, what they're saying makes more sense. Unfortunately, we've had to make decisions on branding and naming and sticking to it. Not that we wouldn't change it eventually, but that's a
Yeah.
really, really good observation.
I relate to that as well, where I am influenced a lot by socionics, but I have chosen to stick with the Myers-Briggs terms because they're more popular from a branding
Yeah.
perspective.
Who asked that question? What was their name?
No, I actually they're all in my group, but I
Oh,
typed them
okay,
all
sure.
up together, so
All
I
right.
don't have it.
Okay.
But sorry about that.
No problem.
But I'm gonna link them to that so that they
Okay.
can comment below.
Yeah.
Second and third function is called balance. But if someone's third function is a demon, how does that work? So
Yeah.
if they're balanced, then your savior and demon function. And should people rely on that? His theory might be different. I just found that confusing.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. So it's it's really hard to communicate 512 types or 32 types of each type. So
In
it's
a
like,
16 type model.
yeah. So
Okay,
like,
yeah.
so some like, I really try and keep it to something I can, I'm trying to track a pattern I'm familiar with, like cars and frogs. So it's like, when you're describing frogs, you're going to have like, when you're describing the definition, they're going to have this kind of definition where their second and third are relatively balanced. And that's going to be true for the majority of frogs as we know them right here. But you're going to have those frogs on the fringes where the rules are upside down. So all of the types you're going to have, like Shannon's double demon is her second function. It's her NI. That's her worst function double demon ever. Not her FI, not even her SE. She skips her NI to hell. And so like that, so she's way on one side of that spectrum of ENTJ. She's not anywhere near the middle. I'm more towards the middle for INT. I'm more of a normal INTJ according to the Myers-Briggs standard.
So how does
So
that manifest? Or sorry, finish what you're saying. I'm just
so
very
yeah,
curious about that.
you're just like frogs. Like this is why like science is like maddening. Is like you define your terms, you describe things, and it's absolutely true. And it's more and more true for the majority of the people that are in the middle of the spectrums. But we call them like glass lizards, where like you get to the end of the spectrum, like that lizard that has no arms or legs, and it looks like a snake, but technically it's a lizard. It's like, okay, do you go in the snake category or the lizard category? Because you look like a
Okay,
snake.
yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? So like what that person's asking is, yeah, there are people out there on the bell curves that we're tracking that their third function or even second function is their greatest problem in life and not necessarily their fourth.
So how would you distinguish between ENJ and the Myers-Briggs, one that uses NI or someone with demon NI?
Well, like Shannon, for example, with the demon NI, it's like, oh my God, she's an EP chaos monkey. It's just like rebellion against control, rebellion against the abstract. Like what we're seeing with the gatherers, savior, SE, or NE, doesn't matter if that function is first, second, or third. The gathering, the savior, SE, NE wants to make everything new. You and I as NI or SI as organizers, we want to take the chaos and figure out how it relates to something we already know. So like an SE person, an NE person, when they go to eat breakfast in the morning, like fuck the routine. What's a new way of doing this? Like I want to see new options. And so it's very hard for them to go over known information. And when the answers to the problem is the same answer that it was yesterday, they forget to look at the answer that worked yesterday because there's got to be a new answer. There's got to be a new answer.
Every time something happens, I need to know or something bad happens. I'm like, this is never happening again. I'm figuring out everything I can to make sure it never happens again.
Right.
Or if I think something might happen, I need to make sure that it never happens.
Right.
Like,
right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So for Shannon, her life struggles, yes, as an EJ is tribe above self. So she's in the martyr where she's going to be constantly giving to others more than herself. Sure. But really as well, it's that demon NI, that demon organized, that demon narrowing in. And so her subtype, she's an EJ-EP. And so she's going to have a lot of EP related issues. I'm an IJ-IP because I've got the self above tribe kind of deal going on. And you would be an EJ-IJ, you know, you get the subtypes.
So have you noticed at scale that those that type themselves incorrectly or have trouble typing themselves tend to be one of these types that loop?
A lot of them are not in the middle of the curve, which I would say Myers-Briggs did a great job of nailing the middle. Like if there's 512 types and you're going to just pick 16 to be an archive or an icon, I think they did an amazing job of just nailing the middle. We've had people come to us that are like just stock out of the book ENFPs. They're like ENFP, balanced sexual energy, consume, play, sleep. You're like, hey, go read one of these crazy ass old Myers-Briggs ENFP profiles, any one of them on the internet. It's actually going to be kind of related to you. It's actually going to be pretty relatable. A lot of people are not in the middle of that spectrum.
Yes.
And so they're just like, I can't relate to any of these profiles or I relate to a collection of them. So yes. And that's what's been very eye-opening for the people that come to us. They're like, oh, no wonder I'm a way on the side of the bell curve of this type. So yeah.
Yes. And I've seen that definitely, like at scale, people that don't know what their type is. But my instinct is to just be like running in the background of my brain. I'm like, okay, well, you just used TI. Okay, now you're using SE. Like, and I'll see, I'll notice what they're doing at that moment. But that doesn't mean that I know what their type is.
Right.
Like there's this one girl who is not sure if she's an ENFP or an ENFJ. And I honestly don't know because I'm seeing her using kind of all of the function. I haven't known her long enough, but that's interesting to think of it as you are. And I feel like that also would be validating for people listening that are like, I don't know who I am. Like, why can't I? Like, maybe they are just an outlier in some way.
Right.
At the same time, I do think that it might have to do with self-awareness. Or would you agree that a lot of
both? It's a lot of these factors. Like, have you spent enough time understanding all these terms that are brand new that we even hardly understand? Like, have you? You know, are you old enough? Are you like? It is a hard puzzle to really solve. I have a lot of empathy for people coming to us going, God, I'm having the hardest time figuring out my type, or even believing that the type you guys are like. I get it. It's real. Like Carl Jung was like, looking back at yourself, good luck. It's a funhouse mirror effect of insanity and that's why I have so much respect for anybody in the personality community, the self-growth community that is at least trying, because the majority of people they don't give a shit. Like, it's hard to do this stuff and to have self-reflection. It's a long process. Yeah. Okay.
So like about 3 more questions. Yep. I love Dave's concept that your tertiary function can be stronger than your secondary one. It really frees things up and makes things more fitted to reality. But is it possible that someone's 2 functions could be the same kind, like FI and FE? And why is that not included in the model?
Yeah. I've thought about that early on. Like, why can't you have FI, FE, or TI, TE? Like, for me, my theory, disclaimer. Coming from kind of a mechanical background, I did the RC airplanes and was heavy into the design. So we would make a lot of planes fly that no one was able to make them fly before. So there's a lot of engineering and flight testing and mechanics and, making shit work. So coming at this psychology stuff from a mechanical point of view of like, how does it work? Kinesthetic, mechanically. And when I started to understand for myself that like how these were opposite coins, part of what helped me was like when I was in the gym, they taught about like corrective stretching of like how your bicep and your tricep are opposite muscles and like you can't have them both on at the same time. So like if your bicep is tight, if you're contracting your tricep, the other one automatically shuts off.
That's a good metaphor,
Yeah, and they would talk about like when your hips kind of go forward, you get a tight back. So like actually you want to tighten these muscles and loosen these muscles and you can bring that. So like, oh, wait a minute. So there's push and pull going on. So when I started understanding like thinking and feeling were a coin, and you like one is robbing from the other, and like introvert and extrovert is the coin. That was like, oh, you can't have thinking without feeling, and you can't have introvert without extrovert. You can't have light without dark. You can't have good
Yes.
without bad. You can't have bicep without tricep. And like that was like for a while I had to like figure that out for myself. So like I think I think the way that the brain is laid out is ingeniously efficient considering the very small amount of hardware. We're all born with these 4 segments, the frontal lobe, the back, the S, the F, the N, and the T. So it's all the same 4 pieces of hardware. And then you're just given an introvert or extrovert charge, a savior or a demon of the thinking or the feeling. And so it's just this counterbalance coding. So yeah, you cannot have FI and FE at the same time. But probably what they're asking is like, practically speaking, in your real life, you do, because you have FI, you have FE, but you still have things that are valuable to you personally in your identity. Now, are you using your FE and TI in kind of a cockamamie way to pull that off? Yeah, probably something like that, right? So like we're still pulling that off, but
because I personally believe that we use all 8, but I definitely agree that you can't really use them both at the same time. And that's something that Crystal is really smart about pointing out, because she always says as an ENFP that she used to look at FJs and she used to think that we had FI and we were expressing it with FE, like before she even knew about the concept of these things. But that it's been mind-blowing for her to realize that these people that are skilled at what you're not, they aren't skilled at what you have. Like these strengths and weaknesses, as you could say, like she would like judge us FJs for our bad FI without realizing that like it would be impossible for us to have this great FE if it wasn't for almost denying the FI. Like those things, you can use them both at different times. I like the idea of the bicep thing because it's almost like you're toggling on and off.
Right. Yeah.
They're not both at the same time.
Yeah, but for me personally, like as I've kind of settled a lot of this stuff for my own self, like the way I live my life is like I know I'm born with an imbalance of favoring 2 functions. But as an adult, I'm responsible for all 8. So I don't give a fuck how I figure out SI or FE. I'm responsible for it. And I know that if I want to stop these tidal waves of problems reoccurring in my life, I got to get on the FE guns and SI guns and TI guns and all of them. And I use that kind of function flow map of all 8 to just kind of keep an eye on it. I don't know how the brain is able to use a function you don't have. I don't care.
Yes, and that's the thing I've been thinking about a lot, because guess what? I actually have an LLC now. That was a huge step for me, and a lot of it nothing really changed. It was really just me believing that I could do it. But okay, that was a huge thing for me. But anyway, like as I've been thinking about entrepreneurship more, I've been reading the E-Myth. I'm realizing that if you are a solo entrepreneur, you're responsible for all of those things. Technically, like your business, if you have created a business entity, that business kind of has to do everything. So you can either hire someone or you can learn to do it. And the thing is that it's really hard to grow yourself, but it's also really hard to work with other people who are different. Like I worked at a company that was only thinkers, and I was hired like to be their communication, and we couldn't communicate very well. And it's like, I feel like they hired me because they can sense that I had strengths for their weaknesses. But like, it's not that easy to just go and, okay, well, I don't want to do this, and so I'm going to make you do it. You still have to communicate with that person. So that's hard too. So would you agree that people who are not using their first 2 functions in your system, would that make them unhealthy?
No, that's hard to tell. It's hard to tell the context. Depends what their goal is. So I don't know.
So you would have to know, like, are they stuck in this demon, or are they almost self-awarely deciding to stretch themselves?
With the big thing that really got our stuff to kind of come alive was pairing the 4 functions. If you were to take SI and NI and realize those are kind of the same thing, and TE and FE and realize they're kind of the same thing, SE and NE and etc., and realizing they're exactly the same as what Tony Robbins is saying. that the 4 human needs, the need for tribe validation, when you listen to what he's been describing for decades, he's describing TE and FE. When he's
Yeah.
describing control and organizing, he's describing NI and SI. So it's like, oh my God, like Carl Jung and Tony Robbins are saying the exact same thing. Like that was very powerful. And that's how we're able to track, to know for sure, are you an EJ or not? Well, you have tribe validation first. You can track that, and then the identity last, right? The other 2 needs of Tony Robbins is grow and give. And I think that's ultimately like really what kind of combines all of these little superheroes together to create the health, is when you are getting the growth as a person and then able to give back. The throttling of the functions is relative. So like maybe turning off your top 2 functions for a while is the best thing that you can do, because you need to work on those bottom 2 because you're in the state of growing and therefore you can give later. Maybe you're just a depressed kid and you feel like shit and it's not a good idea, right? So I think ultimately what's like all of these parts, we're just talking, again, back to like frogs and cars. We're a bunch of cars sitting in a warehouse. There's 512 of us. And we're like, hey, so you were born with those 2 tires flat and I was born with a cylinder. It's like, who the hell cares which part we have imbalanced? What's the race? What are we working to kind of balance ourselves for? And then where are we going and for who? Because we watched our great grandparents' generation not know jack shit about psychology, but they built themselves up. They had a happy view of themselves and family and did something for their community and had no idea what they were doing. And they did something positive because they just were able to activate that growing and giving. So it's like, don't forget the growing and giving. That's the most important part. That's what it's for. And therefore that gives you the standard to then look back on, should I dial down on this function or not?
So what are your thoughts on typing with microaggressions and
microaggressions?
Vocology? Oh no. Oh, whoops. Micro expressions.
Typing when you're mad.
Yeah. Micro expressions. Sorry.
Yeah.
I think it's called Voltology.
Yeah. There's the coffee girls that are good at that. And then the cognitive types website that's been doing that for a while. So
do you have an opinion either way, or how do you conceptualize it?
Yeah, when we're typing people, we see exactly what they're specializing in. That like let's pick out some easy ones, like an FE face versus like FI. Like, come on, like again, the Bugs Bunny cartoons are able to capture. If you were to draw 2 faces, one extremely extroverted and one like sad and mopey, and say which one's the FE one, like everybody can. So that that's Voltology. That's face reading. That's micro at the simplest level. Like cartoons are doing it. So yes, there's something there. We are choosing to not really have it in our checklist officially. We don't track it because every once in a while you'll get a sleight of hand where you'll see somebody that'll look very extroverted and they're not, or whatever. So we absolutely see it. And I know people have been doing this for thousands of years, playing the face reading and your facial structure and features and how your faces moves and your micro expression tying to your personality. So yes. But we just noticed that when we're done typing people and we look at a bunch of ENFPs and look at a bunch of ISTJs, then from there we look back and notice all the similarities. We don't do it on the front end.
Is that because of the sign? It would be harder to scientifically track, maybe?
It is because, for example, like you'll get these neighboring types. So for example, thinking of Shannon's type, we have a lot of females of her type, the TESE. And in her particular doc, and we show this in our class, like there's a few in there that look like TENI types, and there's a couple others that look TENE. So they look like ESTJ. So like what'll happen is like in the TESE group, you'll have like their cousin types that'll look, because when you go over to the TENEs or the TENIs, they look very much like the Shannies. They look very much like that. And some so much, they look exactly like their neighboring type, but we keep typing them as this type. And so it's a contradiction. And so if that contradiction is showing up 1 out of 20 times, and if we're trying to get 90-something% out of 100, it's going to fuck our numbers up. That error is showing up too often, so we get scared. In fact, it's made it worse because now every time I see a guy with red hair and a beard, I want to scream ENFP, and he may not be an ENFP. So we're very careful of that because it's generally accurate, but not quite accurate enough. But I do think it is a great study. It's very fascinating. People have been seeing it for thousands of years, and it's definitely something to pay attention to.
Mm-hmm. So here's my last question is, how would you conceptualize shadow functions? Someone said exactly, can the argument against shadow functions be explained in depth? Which I don't know. Are you against shadow functions, or what do you think about that?
I've even lost my definitions of what I wouldn't even know what shadow functions are called these days.
Well, I guess I'll ask, do you believe we all use 8 functions, or like, why do you focus on the top 4 versus like what are those other functions?
The other 4 of the 8?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think my official stance right now is that mechanically there could probably be a case made, and I don't really care either way, like that we probably are only born with 4. And I think that might be something that can be understood a little bit more decades down the road of like, how is the brain wiring this up? How do we define these terms? What are these different quadrants doing? Like, if your feeling is set genetically as extroverted, and the tribe validation is tied to that, is that ever not the case? Does the extrovertism or the savior or the human needs, is it jumping around from the brain? I don't think so, but at the same time, I'm getting more and more value from socionics, and I'm seeing that a lot of the stuff that they're saying in their math is saying that, like, for me as an INTJ, SI is going to be one of the most important functions that I pay attention to. That's in the shadow, and like, oh my God, I can't tell you how much the SI is forcing my NI and SC to work together to create SI, and it becomes life-changing. And so, like, a lot of their math of working with these 8 functions is consistent with what we're seeing. So I may officially be on the side of we only have all 4, but I live my life pedal to the metal, like you have all 8 and you're responsible for all 8. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
So it seems almost as if it's a question of, are we literally using all 8, or are we reacting to all 8?
Yeah.
Because I do like and agree with pretty much like socionics. I'm one of those people where I agree with your system and socionics and Myers-Briggs, and a lot of people might say that means that oh, well, you can't think this and that, but
I kind of do too. I agree with stuff that contradicts what I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, I see how it's all a version of the truth.
Yeah.
And I relate a lot to like the FI ignoring and like the NE demonstrative in socionics, but I guess I'm not 100% sure. Is that me then flipping the toggle from FE and now I'm all of a sudden FI, or is that my general approach to FI as I see it?
I've noticed that Shannon and I, and the classes we do on some of these Q&As, will put like, this is our fall of 2018 answer on this subject to change every season. Because we've just, every time because it's like, it's a work in progress. We don't fully yet know. So again, disclaimer, Bill, I think we maybe only have 4, but I think we somehow use all 8 and we're responsible for all 8. I'm finding more and more practical value in the socionics model. But I don't know how accurate it is. I think in our lifetime we'll probably find out.
Awesome. Is there anything else that you would like to add about?
No, that's it. No, it's great talking with you.
Awesome. I'm so excited. And thank you so much for giving me your time and explaining your system. And
yeah, thanks a lot for doing this.
Yeah, and go check out his website and everything. Any like little like call to action?
If you're brand new, check out the YouTube, and we've also got some free stuff on the website you can check out first. And we do have a class, and you're welcome to join us.
Cool. Awesome. Well, have a good night.
Yeah. All right, you too.
All right. Bye.
Bye.